Since people took to the streets this summer to protest police brutality and racial injustice following the death of George Floyd, a black man killed in Minneapolis when a police officer knelt on his neck for almost 9 minutes. Josie Barroso looks at how Florida lawmakers want to address a number of national issues around protests, patriotism, police reform, riots, and racism.
And most importantly, be unapologetic about saying Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
House Minority Co-Leader Bobby Dubose ended his speech during the House organization session with a phrase that has inspired protests, counter-protests, and heated debates in recent years. His comments were met with applause by some and little to no response by others, although the top Republican in the Florida House says he's open to conversations about police brutality and racial injustice.
I recognize that my own experience has its limitations, and that emotions can run high. But passion isn't the measure of good policy, and when dialogue descends into diatribe, when it leads to the vilification of an entire profession, when it becomes a justification for violence and lawlessness, then we have abandoned reason for rage. And that is where we should all draw the line.
Governor DeSantis has asked lawmakers to take on legislation aimed at reining in protests that turn chaotic, but not the reason people have taken to the streets, police brutality. How lawmakers will handle all sides of the issue is still uncertain. But even while the phrase Black Lives Matter was met with tension in the chamber, the speaker briefly talked about an issue that in particular affects Black women and families: high rates of mortality and maternal health care.
To hear our minority leader proclaim Black Lives Matter, to have no Republican acknowledging that notion, it's ironic, because you can't care about Black mortality rates and Black mamas if you don't think Black Lives Matter.
Sprowls rejected the call by some to defund law enforcement and went further by suggesting local governments should be stopped from doing so. House Minority Co-Leader Evan Jenny says defunding the police to him means reprioritizing funds and resources.
There's a very real chance when you talk about reimagining the police and what they're actually doing and how they interact with communities, it's going to cost a lot of money in pilot programs. It's going to cost a lot of money in training. There's a very real possibility with the things that we're talking about in our caucus are the exact opposite of defunding.
Sprowls took time during his speech to call out what he sees as another national divide: patriotism. He says people on social media confuse the American sentiment with white nationalism, and that creates more tension.
Those two things are not the same. In fact, being patriotic and loving America is a rejection of things like white nationalism or any kind of doctrine that divides America.
To just sweep that under the rug is not just a detriment to Black Florida, but to all Floridians, because it's something that we're going to need to tackle head on.
Last session, the Senate adopted a resolution condemning white nationalism. A similar resolution in the House did not get a hearing. For Capitol Update, I'm Josie Barroso.
The top Democrat in the Senate also had no problem addressing